Good evening and welcome to the January 8th, 2026 Joint Special Hybrid Meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission and Open Space Conservancy Trust. I am Ashley Hay, Parks and Recreation Commission Chair. Open Space Conservancy Trust Chair Hillary Atay is co-chairing tonight's meeting with me remotely. The time is now 5:02. Tonight's hybrid joint meeting is in person at the Mercer Island Community and Event Center, and we are also using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this week. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us.
Trustees, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Will the city staff please call roll for the Open Space Conservancy Trust?
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Poor.
Here.
Trustee Hildebrandt.
Here.
Trustee and Council Liaison Becker.
Here.
Secretary Bender. Vice Chair Brisseth.
Here.
Chair Atay.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Parks and Recreation Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Will the city staff please call the roll for the Parks and Recreation Commission?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Markson. Commissioner Struck.
Here.
Commissioner McCarthy. Commissioner Bretman.
Here.
Vice Chair Westberg.
Here.
Chair Hay.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
For this hybrid meeting, Chair Atay and I will do our best to recognize you in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. Our first and only item of business. Oh no, sorry, we have one item of business, but our first business item is public appearances. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Commission and Trust about any item, except items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. City staff, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the Commission and Trust?
Yes, Chair, we have 4 public appearances.
Okay, thank you. Individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone, via Zoom, or in person at Mercer Island Community and Event Center, provided they registered their desire to speak with the city admin staff by 4 p.m. today. Our city admin staff will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Commission and Trust. All remarks will be addressed to the group as a whole and not to individual commission, trustees, or staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the group, you may be requested to leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the commission, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Staff will provide you with a 10-second notice when your time is about to expire. Once your time has expired, I will thank you for your comments and move to the next speaker or the first item of business. And if anyone has printed comments that you would like to submit, you can feel free to give those to Raven or email them to us. I know 3 minutes can be tricky to fit everything in there. City staff, please admit the first speaker.
Thank you, Chair. We have in person Ben Sharp.
Welcome.
Hi. All right, I get to go first. So I'm Ben Sharp, Mercer Island resident. I submitted comments via email, which I think kind of summarizes my position. But I wanted to just say a little bit more after I've reviewed some of the feedback and comments on the agenda. So big picture, I'm opposed to any e-bike ban in the parks. So class 1, class 2, I don't think it makes any sense. The e-motorcycle ban, I'm totally fine with. I think that makes sense. I support what the city did there. I think that e-motorcycles have been the cause for most of the angst in the community. I have 5 children. They all ride e-bikes. They rode no bikes prior to getting e-bikes. The hills we live on First Hill, they wouldn't ride them. E-bikes now, they're all over the place. And I think the e-motorcycles, I have lots of friends that have them. I think some of the kids that I know were probably some of the worst offenders, doing the wheelies and riding all over the place. They've all sold them, right? So the e-motorcycle ban has, I think, already affected behavior. And so I think what's happened is citizens have, rightly kind of revolted against the e-motorcycles and some of the behavior, but I think they've lumped everything into e-bikes. And my kids have been the sort of, the victim in a lot of ways of a lot of backlash from citizens over them riding their bikes legally. I think we want them outdoors. We want them off screens. They've had a lot of fun, but they've been sort of victimized by people who, just don't like e-bikes. And if you look through the feedback that you guys have gotten, it's pretty clear that they're talking about e-motorcycles. Wheelies, high rates of speed, like these aren't things that you can really do on like a class 1 e-bike like my kids have. So my advice is to just kind of pause, chill, let the changes that the city passed kind of permeate throughout Mercer Island, and then take the temperature from the public. My guess is you're going to see the complaints go down, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you were to ban them, my concern is, I'll give you a story. My kids are riding their e-bikes on the path of Lid Park. We were walking, they were ahead. This member of the community was irate at them, convinced that it was illegal, that they weren't allowed to do it. Called the police, were yelling at my kids. I finally caught up. I'm like, what the heck's going on? And so I was talking to this guy, he was irate. And he was convinced that because there was a non-motorized vehicle sign at the west side of the park there, that these e-bikes were not allowed. And I was explaining to him, I said, no, e-bikes are bikes. Washington state law has already settled that, but he was not going to have any of it. So the police come, she had to kind of set the record straight with him, kind of calm things down. But it was like a really bad experience, right? The kids were harassed. They felt like they were breaking the law. The police had to come. I mean, it was kind of
10
crazy.
seconds.
So my concern is that there would be a lot more opportunity for situations like that if you guys ban e-bikes in parks. The kids are going to do it anyway. And now you're going to give citizens even more reason to call the police and create unnecessary conflict between
That's time.
kids and citizens. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Will city staff please call our next speaker?
Yes, Chair. Jeff Kuntz.
There is a lot of tech in this room. Good evening. My name is Jeff Kuntz. I'm a member of Neighbors in Motion. My primary interest in this proceeding is really how it may impact the I-90 Mountains to Sound Trail, which many bikes use. Actually, hundreds of thousands of bikers use it on a yearly basis. And so it would be a real problem, I think, for our membership and e-bikers in general if they were not able to continue to use that trail for commuting and to getting to work, commuting, exercise, whatever. I support the staff's recommendation regarding Class 1 and Class 2 bikes being able to use the trail and other trails on the island. I think that brings us into alignment with what other cities do and the county does. It's a good, I won't say compromise, it's just a good solution because it allows them to continue with the commuting. I haven't really, I provided some comments to the board, but I haven't really thought much about the Class 3 ban. I think overall, if we had a speed limit on the island, I would be less enthusiastic about that, but we don't. And so like many other jurisdictions, maybe all jurisdictions out there, I think the notion that we should just restrict Class 3 e-bikes to roadways is a good solution. I do have some problems with the paved, unpaved distinction, which I put in a memo I gave to you guys last night. I think that leads to sort of over-inclusive results and may knock e-bikes out of some areas where maybe they should be. I don't have a means of addressing that tonight because I'm not really familiar with all the ways that bikes use gravel or ungraveled pathways on the island, but I think that should be studied more deeply and of course invite members of the public to be involved in that. A lot of this was generated basically by safety concerns, and I think you're right in the sense that it was a runoff from e-motorcycle sort of concerns. But if we are really concerned about safety, which I think we should be, We should be considering requirements regarding helmets on trails, or at least strong encouragement of that. And I also think it's probably time for us to adopt a speed limit on our trail system coming across from Seattle. Most other jurisdictions do that now. We do not. There are problems with enforcement, but it is a great way to get people to focus on speed and then do periodic checks to make sure that people are doing are not speeding across the trail. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The next speaker, I'll move over in Zoom. That will be Jim Staten, excuse me.
I think I'm on. Can you all hear me?
That's great. Thanks.
Just. My name is Jim Stanton. I'm also on the Neighbors in Motion Steering Committee. I've lived on the island 40 years at the south end and raised 3 sons from infancy on the island to they're out of college. My involvement with them was driven in large part by our concerns as parents on our kids being on the roads, which we do not think are adequately safe for people to be on the roads, and we frankly encourage them to use trails in the park as the only safe alternative on Mercer Island for much of their travel. And that's going to school, visiting friends, or going to other events. But I put all that in a letter, and so I'll move on from that. What I would like to bring to your attention, and I think may have been distributed to you by the city secretary, is a study that was presented at Leafline Trails. And Leafline Trails is a regional trails organization. It's sponsored by Snohomish, King County, Pierce County, Seattle Parks, Mountains to Sound Greenway, to talk about how the trails issues in this region. And there was a presentation at it about e-bikes, which I hope you have the link to now, which discusses this. And it presents a lot of data and discusses a couple of what it talks about as myths about common concerns. One is that most communities use etiquette and not access to control behavior on trails. Second is that the data is that e-bike users don't go any faster than regular bike users. And the third is that generally bike riders are as considerate, if not more so, than other people on bikes. I'm going to leave it there. I think it's worth looking at. It offers advice on trail design to accommodate pedestrians and people on bicycles. I hope this study takes the view that there are many kinds of users in our parks, and we need to work to accommodate all of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, our last speaker is Jay Greer. I'm moving him over now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Can you see me? I hear you. All right. So my name is Jay Greer. I'm a resident of Mercer Island. I've lived on Mercer Island and been active in the community since 2011. I have 3 teenage children. 2 are currently at the Mercer Island High School and 1 recently graduated. My youngest son, Sam, is an avid mountain bike rider, and I've been an assistant coach with Mercer Island's youth mountain bike racing team for the last 4 years. In addition to riding mountain bikes and road bikes, my family also rides e-bikes, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. I've read through the proposed recommendations by city staff. In my view, and in the view of many in the e-biking community and biking community, they're far too restrictive. Mercer Island lags the surrounding communities in its support of e-biking and bicycling in general, and these latest proposed e-bike regulations just highlight that fact. They also go against some of the guidance of the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission, which does allow Class 1 and Class 3 e-bikes on natural surface trails where conventional bikes are permitted. Earlier today, I sent over the information sheet. It's kind of like this one. I'll just do that. It's on again, it was developed by Washington State. It's on the website. I have a link to that as well that I included. You can take a look at that. The most important roadways on Mercer Island, such as Island Crest Way and East and West Mercer Way and other high traffic roads around the island, are not particularly safe for riding bikes, whether it's children or adults, or e-bikes or e-scooters. The trails in our parks and open spaces provide important and safe alternatives to our dangerous roadways. With e-bikes and e-scooters, as well as cycling continuing to grow rapidly, and with the light rail station opening soon, safely connecting all of Mercer Island by bike and e-bike should be a priority. Instead of finding more ways to restrict or prohibit e-bikes, I support more inclusive and common sense solutions to reduce the potential for trail conflicts. These include like a 15 mile an hour speed limit, installing clear signage, looking for ways to better physically separate e-bikes from pedestrians, and educating all users, including pedestrians, on the importance of sharing the space. The e-biking community is diverse. Segments include kids riding their bikes to school, their e-bikes to school, kids riding e-bikes for fun, moms and dads riding with their young children, adults using their e-bikes to commute to work on and off island, and older cyclists and others who no longer want to take on Mercer Island's hilly terrain with a traditional bike. I would like the city to more directly engage with Mercer Island's e-biking community as it's developing its recommendations. Doing so will ensure a good solution is reached that takes into account all the user groups, including the group most directly impacted by the regulations. So those are kind of my written remarks. The first person who spoke today, I don't know them, but I agree pretty much with everything they said. I feel like a lot of this is coming from e-motorcycles that's spilling over into this, and I would love just a complete pause of any new regulations until we see what that does to things. And I have a feeling that's going to really improve the situation quite a lot. I certainly am supportive of the new regulations relating to e-motorcycles, but I don't want to see that extend to everybody else who's on two wheels. We'll call it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Raven, are there any other speakers?
No, Chair, there are not.
Okay, thank you. And you are welcome to stay for as long as you like, or you can listen to it later, whatever you prefer. We will now move on to special business. The only item of regular business tonight is e-bikes in parks. And for that, we welcome Management Analyst Amelia Chaden.
I just got kicked out of the Zoom meeting, so please hold.
I'll fill that time for you if you'd like while you log back in. If anybody is freezing like I am, I will see what I can do about adjusting the heat. So just give me a sign up there on the dais if you'd like me to crank it up a little bit.
What's the sign?
Apparently,
What's the sign?
Yeah, just shivering.
Okay, great. We'll let you know.
There we go.
Are you back into the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, you might want to mute the speaker, or I think we get that echo. Is that what causes the echo, Raven?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, there we go. Good evening, Commissioners, Trustees, Amelia Chaden, Management Analyst. Thank you for joining me this evening for a presentation and discussion on e-bikes in parks. I will walk us through a background of this project, the definitions for e-motorcycles, e-bikes, and e-scooters. I will then walk us through the proposed policy and the next steps before turning it back over to you for discussion. As a reminder, in May of last year, the City Council directed staff to develop an ordinance regulating e-bikes and e-motorcycles on the island. The first step staff took was in September of 2025, when City Council adopted an ordinance establishing regulations for e-motorcycles. This ordinance went into effect the first of this year. With that, staff was tasked with developing a policy for e-bikes in parks. In November, the Parks and Recreation Commission and Open Space Conservancy Trust hosted a study session to take the first pass at regulations for e-bikes and e-scooters in parks and open spaces. This meeting in November provided the direction for the proposed policy in the agenda materials. Commissioners, you have seen this slide before. As a reminder, an e-motorcycle is heavier and more powerful than an e-bike. E-motors may not have operable pedals. They may have a motor with a power output that exceeds 750 watts, which is the limit for a lawful e-bike. And then they may continue to power the vehicle after it reaches a speed of 28 miles per hour. Under the ordinance that was adopted in September, an e-moto operator must have a driver's license and a valid license plate to operate these vehicles on a road. E-motos are not allowed in parks or in open spaces. On screen, we see two examples of e-motorcycles today, and as a last reminder, our conversation today is not about e-motorcycles. Instead, we are discussing the regulations for e-bikes in parks and in open spaces. Under state law, an e-bike means a bicycle with either 2 or 3 wheels that has a saddle, fully operative pedals, and an electric motor with a power output that does not exceed 750 watts. There are 3 classes of e-bikes which are distinguished by maximum assisted speed and how the assistance is provided. Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes have a maximum assisted speed of 20 miles per hour. Class 1 e-bikes provide assistance via a pedal assist, while Class 2 e-bikes have a throttle. Class 3 e-bikes have a maximum assisted speed of 28 miles per hour, and a lawful Class 3 e-bike will only have a pedal assist. E-scooters are classified in state law as motorized foot scooters. They have 2 or 3 wheels, handlebars, a floorboard, and a motor. Importantly, lawful e-scooters have a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour. And on screen, here are 2 examples of a lawful e-scooter. Now that we are clear on the definitions for the vehicles in which we are discussing, I want to take a moment to spell out where the proposed policy would take effect. The proposed policy regulates the operation of e-bikes in parks and in open spaces. Parks is defined as all city parks, public squares, public drives, parkways, boulevards, golf courses, park museums, pools, bathing beaches, and play and recreation grounds under the management and control of the Parks and Recreation Department. Tonight, we are focused on what is defined as a park in the city code, which includes areas and parcels that may not be included in the park zone. Open space land is defined as a parcel of land that is largely undeveloped and is suitable as a natural habitat. Again, open space land will also include other parcels that are not included in the open space zone. Notably, this policy is not regulating the use of e-bikes and e-scooters in the right-of-way, on public roads, or on private property. In short, the proposed policy would prohibit Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes, as well as e-scooters from parks and open spaces, except on paved trails or as otherwise posted. Class 3 e-bikes would be prohibited from parks and open spaces. This policy was developed based on the input received at the November 2025 joint special meeting. Staff received a number of questions about the definition of paved that was included in the proposed policy. Under the policy as it's currently written, Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes would be allowed on trails paved with asphalt, concrete, brick, and stone. And when I say stone, I mean stone like stone pavers, not like small stones. E-bikes and e-scooters would be prohibited on trails that are surfaced with gravel or crushed rock, trails that are made out of wood or boardwalks, wood chips, or dirt trails. The policy as it's currently written follows the regulations that King County adopted for these vehicles. Additionally, under the City Code, the Parks and Recreation Director has the authority to establish rules and regulations for park operations and park management. Staff's intent with this policy is to address conflicts between trail users. With the authority of the Parks and Recreation Director, staff will have the ability to address conflicts that may not be covered under this policy. Shifting gears slightly, the city manages and operates Aubrey Davis Park and a segment of the I-90 trail. However, these areas are owned by WashDOT. The policy as it is currently written is consistent with existing WashDOT regulations. The policy is also consistent with the regulations that Seattle and Bellevue have adopted for the I-90 trail. If the city were to adopt regulations that were inconsistent with both WashDOT, Seattle, or Bellevue, the city would need to seek approval from WashDOT. Like the Aubrey Davis Trail, the city manages and operates the South Mercer playfields, but this area is owned by the Mercer Island School District. Staff connected with the Mercer Island School District, and the school district expressed their support for the policy as currently written and stated that they intend to adopt the same policy for e-bikes and e-scooters at the South Mercer playfield once the policy has received formal city council action. City staff and the police department worked together to create the proposed policy. I want to note that this policy is directing where e-bikes and e-scooters can be ridden in parks and in open spaces. This policy is not intended to direct how these regulations would be enforced. Direction on enforcement regulations or enforcement mechanisms, and penalties will come from the City Council. Commissioners are welcome to include their input for enforcement on the handoff memo to the City Council. I will now turn it over to Commander Seifert to offer a few words from MIPD's perspective.
Thank you, Amelia.
Good evening, everybody. It feels weird talking from back there, so I'll come up here. I missed the beginning, but I do know what the slideshow looks like. One of the things we really want to express, at least from a police point of view, is without enforcement, the rules don't really exist. And to make sure that they are enforced, it's really helpful that the rules are simple and they make sense to everybody, whether that's the officers enforcing them or the people that are using the parks or the bikes. It's super important that an officer can be on scene and know right away, this is a violation or this is not a violation. We can get the educational material out. And it just, when it gets too complicated and too complex, taking into account things like the road surface, it's going to be very difficult for our officers to enforce that. So Amelia's done a great job in making sure that what we're presenting here is very simple and to the point and applies to the safety that we're looking to apply and keeping the parks the way we want to keep them. So thank you for that. And I can answer any questions if you have any.
Peter?
Thank you. Couple of the public appearances this evening talked about a speed limit, let's say 15 miles an hour. I saw on the slide that the maximum speeds generally are going to be faster than that. Any comments on a speed limit of some type?
So for a speed limit for a bike to be enforced is very difficult. For the police, first of all, we'd have to have officers set up in a place where they could do speed enforcement, and then they're limited in what tools they can use. Our officers mostly use radar. Radar wouldn't be too effective on a bike because it's a small, I'm going to say target. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's a small target. So it's hard to make sure that if I have a couple of bikes coming towards me and I'm using radar to enforce that, I can't say for sure which bike it is that I'm picking up the speed on. So radar enforcement and speed enforcement with bicycles can be very challenging.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Any questions online? Oh, sure. Councilmember Fick.
I mean, yeah, I just have a follow-up on the speed limit question. I mean, I know that regionally there's lots of places that have speed limit restrictions. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, like, is there self-enforcement by people that know that that's the speed limit, or are we taking the approach that, like, if we can't enforce it, I mean, you already said, if we can't enforce it, then why do we have that in place? I'm just wondering if there's knowing the limitations that you just said exist, are we saying there's just not a value And I'm not necessarily saying I support a speed limit. That just has come up and I'm trying to understand whether or not we couldn't.
So I can't speak too much to what happens regionally as far as enforcing speed limits, but my understanding would be, we use the term, especially with vehicles, too fast for conditions. So there may be a 15 mph speed limit, and if there is something that occurs, it's probably going to be more on a civil side where, like, if we had two people get into a collision, you could say this person was going well over the posted 15 mph speed limit, as opposed for being a law enforcement issue where they enforce it with some sort of criminal penalty. Totally guessing there, can't say for sure.
Commissioner Westberg?
In looking at the pictures in the presentation, from a distance and even close up, there's not a lot of difference between a class 1 and a class 3 e-bike. Do you see problems in trying to enforce rules enforce rules if they're different for a type of bike?
I would say 2 years ago, yes. In the last couple of years, our officers are starting to get pretty good at it. There are specific things that the bikes have. There's specific labeling requirements where if the officer has a reason to contact the rider, they can make sure that it has the appropriate labels. And then if it doesn't have the appropriate labels, that's an offense within itself. So due to the amount of bikes and e-bikes and e-motorcycles we've seen on the island the last several years, the officers are getting pretty good at identifying which is which.
Okay, thank you.
I see you have a question, but I have an add-on sub-question to your question. I know these bikes can be modified. Would that make the existing suggestion of policy difficult? Maybe you have a class 1 or 2 bike that you've modified to be more like a class 3, but it is technically and those are not allowed now as of January 1st. That makes it tricky if we're allowing 1 and 2 and they've modified it to be a 3. Do you base it on the bike or the speed? And we know the speed's hard to enforce.
It's a combination of all the factors. You have the speed of the bike, whether it needs to be pedaled in order to go certain speeds. Some of the bikes, some of the classes that you guys learned tonight, if it's not being pedaled, it's not going to go forward. Some you're able to have the acceleration assist without pedaling at all. And if somebody takes a class 1 bike and modifies it to a class 3, would probably be the most common sort of thing. And they haven't changed the label to reflect the changes they've made, that's technically a violation in itself. So it's a combination of factors. So if the officers are pretty good at judging speed. If they see a bike that's supposed to max out at 28 miles per hour, but they see it going 40, 45 miles per hour, they're going to be able to say, that's clearly a modified bike, and then they can deal with it accordingly.
Yeah, and but we're assuming that if community members are calling in, they may not know the differences, right? Yeah. So, okay,
True.
interesting.
Chair Hay,
Yeah.
Councilmember Reynolds has his hand up.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. This was for Amelia. I hope it's not too late for that. In the presentation, she indicated that the MISD had expressed support for the proposal. I'm curious who that is. Does that mean the school board voted on it? Does it mean you spoke to the school district superintendent, or what was it?
I'm going to let Ryan take that one.
Ryan Daly, Recreation Manager. We had conversations with school district staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen.
I have a question for the police officer. What's the department's experience with conflicts between e-bike users and pedestrians? Or if it's within your bailiwick, property damage, if any, that e-bikes have caused in any of the park or open space areas on the island?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure when it comes to property damage, what we're seeing consistently. We are unfortunately seeing some e-bike, e-motorcycle versus pedestrian accidents, and even e-bike, e-motorcycle versus regular vehicles. So those are occurring. It's thankfully not occurring too much here on the island, but it does occur. I can't think offhand of any property damage incidents that have happened in the last few years.
Just to follow up, just to get a sense, I'm not trying to pin you down on numbers, but in the last couple of years, would you say that you maybe, as far as the person to person or vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to pedestrian, conflicts, one a week, one a month, couple of times, or? Because
It would be a total guess, but I'd say a few times a year. And that's a total guess. I don't have those numbers in front of me.
But it's not,
I
but
can
it's
get
not,
them.
it's not a couple of weeks.
No.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bretman.
I have another couple questions for you, Commander. One is the complaints that you've been receiving at the police department, have those been related to the class 3 vehicles or the class 1 and 2 e-bikes? Or have you been able to differentiate between the two?
Very good question. And I know tonight's presentation focused mostly on class 1, class 2, and class 3 e-bikes. The majority of the complaints the police department are dealing with are the bikes that aren't any of those. It's the ones that are basically e-motorcycles that are sold as e-bikes. The ones where you don't have to pedal, they have very fast top speeds. That's what we're dealing with more often than not.
Okay, so are you getting many complaints about the class 1 and class 2 e-bikes?
Not very many, because if that's occurring, that tends to be occurring on trails, and people that buy those ride them like bicycles. They tend to be responsible for the most part, obviously not 100%, but the capacity for the officers to really do enforcement when it comes to e-bikes is focusing mostly on the e-motorcycles right now.
Okay, that's helpful. And then you mentioned wanting to see simplicity in the whatever policy is created, and that makes a lot of sense. I do wonder, because we've gotten a lot of feedback around the difficulty of commuting in some parts of the island, and that parks are very helpful for commuting. In some part, especially thinking of kids going to school and things like that. My kids commute through parks at times. And so I'm wondering, but I don't want to create too much complexity, as you said. So I'm wondering if you have any idea for those sorts of areas, like along 68th in the park along 68th Street, where there is no real, there's no sidewalk. And so a lot of people go through Pioneer Park. And it's a very wide road. So I've just been trying to think, a wide trail. So I've been trying to think, are there places like would width work? Or would it be signage if we wanted to create exceptions to a general policy?
And I don't 100% know what they're doing as far as the park side for making the rules for each of the specific trails. But for the officer's point of view, if there's an exception due to, like what you're saying, we travel on 68, there's no sidewalk here to keep kids safe. They're going on that. And that is a pretty big wide trail right there. A sign saying that there's an exception to the rule there would be helpful to the officers.
Okay.
Ashley.
Yes.
Thank you. So Commander, you said kind of earlier, that as far as the type 1 and 2 and so forth, there's not been many incidents that you can recall or whatever. And I'm wrestling with a little bit, but on the other hand, in the presentation, it said that MIPD does support this proposed policy. If the policy isn't adopted, does that create a lot of heartburn? I'm just trying to understand kind of the strength of your support, if you will. If saying, well, no, this is really a problem, then this is going to help a lot, or yeah, I think it'll work, but it's not a big deal either way. I'm just trying to
I think as a
balance that.
PD, we look at it from 2 points. You have the safety. We don't want somebody getting hurt, and it's
Right.
nice to have something in place prior to a big incident as opposed to reactive to an incident.
Okay.
And then it's obviously damaging the parks. These bikes are heavy. They are driven fast. They're not always driven as responsibly as a regular bicycle would be, just because of the limitations of, having a motor versus not having a motor. So we do support having something in place prior to an incident. It's always terrible to do the right thing right after you need the right thing done. So.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful.
Sir.
Ryan.
Thank you, Commander Cipher, for that. I was just going to add to within the presentation where it demonstrated MIPD's support. That was for perhaps the way the policy was written as well, based on clarity of the policy, not necessarily for or against it. But if I could ask a question as well. maybe broadly thinking about enforcement of park rules and regulations. Oftentimes those are posted on a sign. Would you be able to talk a little bit about how enforcement of general park rules works for the department?
I think I know what you're asking, and park rules are kind of interesting because we don't, like school zone's a good example. We have officers that go to a school zone and they're going to focus on doing school zone speed enforcement. Parks isn't necessarily something that happens consistently unless we know there's going to be a large event there. Otherwise, you kind of have an officer there, maybe no need for them to be there, or there won't be much of a return on the investment of their time. Most park enforcement will occur as a response to a call. So somebody calls and says, hey, there's bikes out here tearing up the grass, or more frequently it would be dogs. There's dogs off leash, or there's dogs that are doing things that they're not supposed to be doing on specific fields. So most park enforcement will be responsive to calls as opposed to proactive on the police department being out there.
You read right between the lines. Thank you.
Chair Hay, Councilmember Reynolds.
Oh, Councilmember Reynolds. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is a question for Ryan or Commander Seifert, but we had a couple speakers tonight or in emails say that there's a sign on the I-90 trail currently that says no motorized vehicles allowed. Assuming that's true, I don't know. E-bikes have motors. Was it ever the intent of that to ban e-bikes under current rules, or is that just leftover signage written before e-bikes existed?
Yeah, I'll chime in on this one. Sam Harb, Parks Operations Manager. I think that's specific to where cars might drive in, like from the parking lot. So that's where signage was installed for a certain reason and maybe was misinterpreted to be inclusive of bike users on the trail, more so car vehicles, entering bike trail.
Okay, so it sounds like whatever we do, there's some signage that could probably benefit from some clarification, just to avoid confusion. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Deputy Mayor Picker.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to Ryan's comment about the enforcement. I mean, you're saying that most of the enforcement is in response to people calling. One of the speakers tonight spoke about someone calling and you responding to that. I'm just curious if you can tell us how the enforcement has gone in the past. Like, do you find that's effective? Like, I mean, the community, I know, asks a lot, like, what do I do if I see someone, even with an e-motorcycle? Like, what do I do? And the guidance, I think, is to call 911. And so you go out and like, how often do you get there and the person is still there? Or how does it go engaging with people? Because presumably whatever you're doing now is going to continue happening if we create these restrictions.
Realistically, depends on the nature of the call. I would say the majority of calls that we get that we respond to in the parks are the parks being used incorrectly. The majority of that's probably due to animals or dogs. We're pretty good at getting out of there. Obviously, it depends on if the officers are available, how many officers are on the island. But that's a type of call where the person's going to be there for a while. They plan to be there. So we're able to contact both the subject that's being complained about as well as the complainant. With bikes, that may change. We don't have enough data yet since we don't have these rules in place yet. But that will definitely be a little bit more challenging because by the time an officer gets there, they're going to be in a different location than they were when the call came in. So,
Chair Hay, Charite has her hand up.
Charite, thank you.
Thank you. This question is for Amelia. In the new proposed code, there is the language about no e-bikes on soft trails unless there is some kind of exception made. I just have a question about how those exceptions are determined and then who gets to determine them, just what that process is. Because in the presentation, I did notice, for example, the boardwalk across Ellis Pond was an example that would not permit e-bikes, and it's a huge throughway for kids going to the high school, coming from the south end and also coming from the neighborhood. So I was just curious about some clarification on how those are decided. Thank you.
Ryan says he wants to take this one.
I'll even turn on my video, which I'm sorry I haven't. Well, maybe I won't. There we go. Excellent question. There's a couple of ways we could go about identifying specific trails. One could be through specific exempted trails, I should say. One could be through this process, identifying them, making recommendations. The other could be in the handoff memo to City Council recommending a work plan item for the department director to go and review the trail system and identify trails based on, for example, connectivity, to be able to highlight and come back and bring those forward. And then there's sort of a third component, and I think this is where the city of Mercer Island is extremely fortunate with the Open Space Conservancy Trust and the Parks and Recreation Commission, is this forum. Being able to come in front of this board, have a general citizen highlight a specific trail location that staff could go out and then review. So there would be different mechanisms and different opportunities to bring that forward. And it could work two ways. It could work with other citizens who maybe want to see walk-only trails or something along those lines. So it can be a sort of an iterative process. Was I close to answering your question?
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I think I just forgot to mention before, I think the same needs to be discussed for the perimeter trails in Pioneer Park in the Northwest and the Northeast also, especially for kids going back and forth to Lake Ridge in the middle school. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think Commissioner Westberg has a follow-up question.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that question to Ryan, so it would be the Director of Parks and Recreation that would be able to make that determination rather than have to do a separate, have the council deal with it through an amendment to the code or something like that.
Correct. The Parks and Recreation Director, per the City Code 9.30, has the ability to establish park-specific rules.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bretman?
I'm interested in the difference of implementing a policy that's either a complete ban on class 1 and 2 with exceptions versus allowing class 1 and 2 vehicles to go wherever bikes can go, and then putting up bans for you, or I guess putting up specific bans on trails, like actually don't go here. So my question makes sense, like completely banning it and then saying, okay, you can go here, versus not banning it at all and saying they're all the same except where there are notices.
Was your question a would you rather?
Yes.
Which one?
I'm asked.
That's how good that question was.
I'd be interested. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what the staff feel like would be or think would be a more effective approach.
Excellent question. My feeling on the way I personally would look at it is, what is the larger impact, and have that be your policy statement. So if the desire of the board was to, which this proposed policy is more of a ban, right? Or not, I shouldn't say ban, but very restrictive. That's a very clean statement that's made. It's very, very simple. And then the exceptions would be very limited. So you're talking about, in my mind, I'm thinking like maybe one trail per park based on connectivity. Now, if the desire of the board was for the opposite of that, to have open access but restricting just a few locations, then I would go to that direction. If that's the way my thought process is working. I haven't talked to Sam about that.
I would just quickly add to that the direction staff was working off of from the November meeting was that we were acting off of e-bikes are prohibited except where permitted, which is how we ended up to where we are today. Yeah.
Commissioner Cohen.
This is for Amelia or maybe Ryan. It's a little different subject, but what has been the community outreach on this one? I mean, for example, I didn't see anything offhand on Let's Talk, which the city always says, well, it's been on Let's Talk. And you have the transportation improvement projects, hard kind of stuff, but nothing. I know that these meetings have been publicly noticed and so forth. But as we're hearing, this is a subject that involves safety of riders, safety of non-riders. It involves recreation by one group of people, recreation by other groups of people. It involves climate change because of commuting. So there's a whole bunch of important stuff. And I haven't, other than by word of mouth, compared to some of the other issues that we focused on, I haven't gotten a sense that there's been the same level of community output and input. Other than the e-bike community and some of these people who have eventually followed this a little more closely.
Yeah. I'll take my first stab at it, if
Okay.
that's all right.
I was like, who's gonna go?
Excellent question, Commissioner. Originally the output, actually, Amelia, would you talk about going into the first meeting, the promotion that was done there?
Yeah, so I will start off by saying that there's not currently a Let's Talk page for e-bikes or e-motorcycles. For the first meeting, we had posted on social media across all platforms asking for feedback to be emailed to the Parks and Rec Commission and advertising the first meeting. That was unfortunately not done for this meeting. Is that what you're looking for, Ryan?
Yes, and then I would just highlight additionally, for this topic, we're utilizing 2 separate boards to be that vehicle and to be that sounding board. So using the 7 Parks and Recreation Commissioners as well as the Open Space Commission trustees to provide that input. So if additional community involvement is something that's desired, that is a recommendation that could absolutely be provided by the Parks and Recreation Commission or Open Space Conservancy Trust.
Yeah, I'm thinking, may I follow up? I'm thinking, for example, some of the signs at some of the entrances to some of the parks, when I can't remember what it was even, was it the Dean's Park thing and the bike skills thing where there were signs with a QR code or whatever you call it that you can learn about it. And I haven't seen that on this particular issue. And there are a lot of people that don't track city stuff on the same social media that some people do. So I'm not sure where I even come down substantively on this whole thing, but if I'm somebody who hasn't been attuned to it because of my involvement on this commission, and somebody is talking about either banning something or permitting it, it bothers me a little bit to think about the lower level of community engagement on this one. That's what my point was. Thank you.
So I have a related question on process. If we were to make a motion tonight and this goes to council, do you happen to know if they have any intention of doing outreach, having community conversations about this, or is this it? Is this the opportunity?
I would not dare to speak on council's behalf with the deputy mayor and a council member online. Honestly, we were tasked with developing a recommendation on e-bikes in parks to move forward to the city council to then decide where to go from there. So this is literally the initial step. So I anticipate there absolutely would be additional community engagement at the council level because that would come before them as a council.
But if we were to send a recommendation and our motion tonight on, that's our last bite of the apple, so to speak. In this format.
Yes.
Okay.
Depending. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Commissioner Cohen, because I do have concerns about sending something along about a really important topic that's either banned or not. And this has happened over the holidays, and it would affect a huge area of our community and a lot of people. So not knowing what council's timeline would be and the level of community engagement that they have in mind, we have received enough comments, a huge stack of comments here, which is just a small sample actually of who it would affect. So I'm happy we have this time tonight to discuss this before giving a final, not to take away from the questions if anybody has additional questions, but I'm glad you brought up that important issue. Do we have remaining questions?
Can I just say one thing? I didn't mean to suggest that staff did not follow the direction from the last time in putting together the proposal you did, because I think you did, because that's kind of the way I thought this was headed. It's been since then that I'm, trying to grapple a little bit, with greater difficulty with it. So I just want to be clear on that. I don't think that you disregarded what was said by any means.
Absolutely. Thank you for that distinction. Do we have additional questions? Okay, thanks, Ryan.
If I could just add, I thank you, Commissioner Cohen, for those thoughts as well. And as we've seen policies work through our boards, this is going exactly the way most of them do, where we get to digest information. I think that's outstanding, and that's the reason we do these processes. I would add, the recommendation to the city council doesn't have to be it's this specific policy and that's it. As we've seen the Parks and Recreation Commission do on a couple of different scenarios, you include a handoff memo that identifies additional steps or additional potential work plan items that guide the process even further. So I don't want the commission to feel limited in the input that can be provided to both recommend additional steps. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
We did jump into questions one slide early, which is just fine. You're all good. You're all good. As Ryan said, staff would work, assuming that the policy as proposed or amended would be adopted, staff would work with the chair and vice chair to come up with a handoff memo and then return at a regularly scheduled meeting to approve this memo. And if we needed to, we could have that be an iterative process. That memo would then be used to prepare an ordinance that would be presented to city council. I anticipate, as the person that would be bringing that forward, that we would come first as a study session and then have a first reading and a second reading of the ordinance. And then to fully close the loop, once an ordinance is adopted, we'll work with the school district to develop signage and educate users for the South Mercer playfields. So turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any remaining questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Amelia and Commander Seifert. I think at this point, there is potential to make a motion tonight. But given the number of questions that just came up now and the number of comments that we've received, it seems that we still have more to discuss on this issue. And if anybody's willing to make a motion now, they can. But I also want to offer the opportunity to have open discussion on some of these really important topics that came up. Peter?
Yeah, yes, I would support kind of postponing a actual motion to approve or something. And really, I mean, as you mentioned, we've got a lot of comments, a lot of great information that I think if we take a month or a few weeks to kind of digest a little bit better and have, conversations with community members about it and so forth, I think that's worthwhile. And I don't think, Brian, we're not under any real time crunch, are we? Or are we?
Amelia's looking at me from the other side. Obviously, we want to be respectful of the commission's time and move expeditiously. However, there isn't. We want to get it right. I mean, that's our goal. That's always been the commission's goal with all of the policy work, and so taking another month or two and working through a couple of additional meetings possibly would be more than appropriate. I think what would be helpful maybe tonight, and Amelia, I'd look for you to jump in on this, is we have a proposed policy. We needed to put something down to get a reaction. I think we're starting to get a temperature on what that reaction is. Would love to hear feedback on that policy. And then I would anticipate maybe at the following meetings, and this might be where Chair Atay and Chair Hay could get together and discuss where they see the roles of the respective boards going as we move forward. So that would be helpful to the process if this is a splitting point or if we work in tandem as we continue. So I think staff would love to get some reaction, get some idea of where to head, so that we could further prepare materials as we go forward. Or if the commission and the Open Space Conservancy Trust wanted to pause, have some community individual conversations and get a better feel, that's always a direction to go as well.
Okay, thank you. And it may be that we get to a motion tonight, but if we don't, I don't want anybody to be concerned about that. But I do want to take this opportunity when we are together with the Open Space Conservancy to continue the dialogue that we began at the last meeting and discuss some of the topics and community input that we have received in the context of the potential motion policy that we landed at last time. So Ryan, I don't know if you're able to pull up the wording of the policy. We could do a little recap maybe of where we were in November, how we arrived at this potential policy, and how we feel now as a board and commission based on some time to think about it, some community input, and whether or not this represents what we want to achieve with the policy. Thank you. Okay, so the potential policy that we landed at in November disappeared. But I'm sure it's coming back. Okay. It is to not allow class 1 and 2 in parks and open spaces except where permitted. That's where we landed, correct? Okay, there it is. Thank you. Thank you. And on paved trails. So without diving into every single question on the matrix here, which would have us here until Saturday, I'd like to check with the board, with commissioners, and get an idea of where you stand now on this policy. If you might want to highlight a couple things that have really stood out to you as far as why you still support or maybe don't support this anymore. And if not, what direction would you like to see it go in? I know that's extremely broad. So if anybody else has something really specific that they just, came up in comment or whatnot that you want to highlight, that's fine as well. Commissioner Westberg.
Well, it seems to me that based on all the comments that we've received, both in writing and the ones tonight, that with regard to the policy, you could kind of break it into a couple different pieces. One is the question about class 3 bikes. Can we reach agreement about class 3 e-bikes and whether or not they belong on park trails at all? Because that's one key element of the proposed policy. Then with regard to class 1 and 2, there have been a lot of questions and issues that have come up with regard to not allowing those on all natural surface trails in the park, because many of those natural surface trails are used as are used as commuting corridors or safety corridors for kids riding to school. They've been used in the past by e-bikers, class 1, 2 e-bikers, because we haven't had a separate rule for e-bikes. So to me, if I would suggest that we could make some progress by trying to identify, maybe split out class 3 and have a discussion on class 3 and resolve that one. And then maybe go to class 1 and 2 and explore those issues and decide that have been raised and decide whether we can either have a consensus on how to handle those or whether we need to go back and get more information. Identify trails, for example, which might be excluded or set aside as commuting corridors or things like that. But I think I would suggest we could make progress by maybe pulling out separate issues and discuss and narrowing the scope of the discussion. For example, right now, as far as the open space areas managed by the Conservancy, there's a trail guideline that the Conservancy has put in place that says no motorized vehicles are allowed on soft surface trails. That means right now, within Pioneer Park and the Angstrom open space, no e-bikes are allowed on park trails. So that's sort of this outlying issue that if we're going to try to bring together a coherent policy overall, we would need to address. But that's just my thought, is maybe break it into pieces and deal with the pieces.
So I have a couple of clarifying questions based on that. Whether Ryan, you might know, or Commander Cipher, perhaps you know this. The difference between class 1, 2, and 3 is the speeds of 20 miles per hour versus 28, correct? And the newly implemented ordinance for the e-motorcycles, does that cover any of the class 3 bikes? Are we talking about the same thing or something completely different? Class 3 still has the pedals. Okay.
They're bigger and heavier.
Just to make sure.
E-motorcycles
we're
are
talking
a
about the same
separate
things.
matter from e-bikes.
Okay. And the only difference really between 1, 2, and 3 is that speed, 20 versus 28 for the most part, correct?
There we go. Yeah, so a couple of things to clarify there. The class 1, class 2, class 3 technically are not motorized vehicles. They're considered bicycles. So there is a separation between no motorized vehicles. Even though they have motors, they're considered bicycles. The class 1 and class 2 are the 20 mile per hour max. The class 3 is the 28 mile per hour max. And then you have with the class 2 the ability to accelerate and use the motor without pedaling to assist. So there's a little bit of difference between each one of those.
Okay. And then regarding our current regulations, not to be too pedantic, but on the wording of it, is it that operation of motorized vehicles or bikes is prohibited, in which case you could cycle without using the motor with a class 1, 2, or 3 bike, right? I mean, it's kind of a big distinction. We don't have to prohibit.
I think you're correct with that.
Yeah.
I don't think the
Operation
class
of
1, class 2,
motorized.
class 3 e-bikes would be qualified as a motor vehicle when it says no motor vehicles on the parks or the trails.
And I think this is a nuance that was brought up in November, because it is very possible to ride the bike without using the motor. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Might not be the preferred mode, but it's possible. Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Cohen.
I guess I need some more information before I would want to vote on anything either way. Because as you know, from my past experience, I would rather see no bicycles of any sort in open spaces. So that's my bias. But on the other hand, I come to at least question this, particularly when I hear that from the commander that, there's not one of these complaints coming in about class 1 and 2s every week or something. And that it's been manageable. I'm like you, I don't want to have it be an incident an unfortunate incident that causes things to change, but I don't see the immediacy. And when I combine that with the public input that's been done or not done, if we wind up bumping more discussion of this to a future time, I'd like to talk about, or maybe staff would have a recommendation on what more simplified effort to get some public input, or at least increase public awareness opportunities there might be during that period of time, so that we can get that. I'd also like to know, for example, who mentioned it? Mar, was it you, Bob? Ellis Pond? And was that you? Or, oh, I'm sorry.
It was me, Don.
Okay. So, for example, I don't know whether Ellis Pond and the North Luther Burbank wetland areas, I don't know if there's a risk with electric bikes of oil dropping from motors, which and there's a risk of that to a certain extent with non-e-bikes, right? But I don't know if there's a difference in that, and those are very fragile areas. And I don't care if somebody said to me, I don't want you riding your bicycle on the boardwalk at Luther Burbank because it's an eagle nesting area, and even if there's a drop of oil, that's a bad thing. Then I wouldn't do it. But so there's some things that I would like to know about. If we stick with the proposal that there is, and you were asking Ryan how we felt about it, I think we need to have a definition of paved, just for clarity, and that was addressed in the matrix, and I'm the definition potential that you came up with, I might tinker with it here and there, but it's okay with me. I don't think it's a good idea to have stones parentheses pavers in a policy that somebody is expected to follow, because if I were that person's lawyer next week, I would say stones, fine. Okay, chipped rock, that's stone. Don't give me this parenthetical. So, but that's a small matter of dealing with.
Are we opening up the floor for general discussion at this point?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Okay, I did have some comments, if I may. I reviewed the state statutes regarding electric bicycles on trails, and found that generally speaking, or trails and highways, generally speaking, the statutes lump together class 1 and 2 e-bikes with unpowered or human-powered bicycles, which I find to be a cogent policy. The e-bike, the class 3 e-bikes are dealt with separately. But in any case, the state rules make specific provision for local jurisdictions and the parks director to override the general state policy. And I noted with interest in the brochure that was sent around by Jay Greer that the director for the state parks has chosen to make all of the regional trails open to class 1 and class 3 bicycles. They seem to be leaning in the direction of allowing e-bike use in general in the state parks. Specifically, I think they have in mind the Toulouse to Cascades State Park Trail, which is a repurposed trail line or rail line, and there are other rail lines in the state that fall in the same category. The devolution of the policy to local jurisdictions, the way that the King County has chosen to implement this is to restrict the class 1 and 2 e-bikes to the hard surface trails, and that I believe our policy has been modeled after that. So for simplicity or consistency, it would make sense to adopt the policy that we've proposed. However, because, well, quite a bit of the feedback that we've received prior to this meeting says generally that community is in favor of allowing e-bike use within the park and not really taking into account the surface of the trail. And I think that that's reasonable. And I could go into a little bit of the physics behind that, but I don't think there's any more erosion that you would see from use of an e-bike on a soft surface trail than you would see from a regular bicycle. Let's see, have I covered my notes here? Based on that, I think that if we were to adopt the proposed policy as it's been written, I would strongly encourage other members of the Open Space Conservancy Trust Board to consider overriding that over most of the level trails within the Pioneer Park, because the park does provide connectivity to many neighborhoods, and the ability to use e-bikes provides mobility for older users and youngsters trying to get to school. And also there's the aspect of being able to get out into nature and simply enjoy things and not have to worry about going home and trading your transportation mode in order to use a trail for exploration and enjoyment. So I think that pretty much covers my my comments for right now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Tom, Trustee Hildebrandt, this wasn't working well before. Could you, your last point there, did you say that you thought Class 1 and Class 2 should be allowed on any of the trails in Pioneer Park? Did I understand that correctly?
I'm generally speaking, I'm in favor of allowing the Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes to go anywhere a regular bicycle would be allowed. I don't really see any difference between them in terms of how they use the trails or how they would interact with other trail users, be they on foot or on horseback.
Okay,
I don't
thanks.
really see any fundamental difference there.
I feel like the earlier conversation was focused on the perimeter trails, so that's why I was clarifying what you said.
Yep.
Commissioner Struck? Oh, sorry. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Cohen?
Well, I think it was at the last meeting where somebody, and it was probably a staff member, but I don't remember for sure, commented on e-bikes versus regular bikes, e-bikes being heavier and their acceleration being more rapid, particularly for somebody who wasn't an experienced user of it. So that somebody at least expressed the view that there could be more damage. But then somebody said in response, maybe you, Tom, that maybe this was the physics, that with a non-e-bike, you have a smaller smaller tires, so that the potential for digging in deeper. You know the physics.
Yes.
I don't. But
Thanks for allowing me to respond to that. The e-bikes, generally speaking, are heavier because they have a motor and a battery, and they have to carry the extra weight. So in order to handle that in the design of the bicycle, generally speaking, the rims are wider, the tires are fatter, and the fatter tires are almost universally run at lower pressure. So a standard bicycle that's set up for road travel can have pressure in the tire exceeding 100 pounds per square inch. And the e-bikes typically are not going to go over about 35 pounds per square inch. They're comparable to a car tire rather than the really stiff road tires on a standard bicycle.
Yes. Now I can turn it on. So I appreciate, I had missed the prior meeting. I'm very glad to be here tonight and engage in this. Coming in, it felt like this policy was a good summary. However, the questions that I have coming out of tonight relate also, as you asked, the clarification, aside from speed, I'd appreciate it if we could get more information told to us again about class 3 versus class 1 and 2. And I was intrigued, Tom, that you said the state law already separates the two. So that's one issue that would help me. And I appreciated what you noted at the beginning about should it be that the bikes are not allowed except on certain connector trails, or are there actually so many connector trails that it should be the opposite way? So that's something that will help us in our final decision making.
Thank you.
Chair Hay. Councilmember Reynolds.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, I just want to comment on one thing. Commissioner Cohen a minute ago brought up weight and acceleration potential of e-bikes, and I think a number of the comments you folks got addressed the weight as well. And I'm just going to comment on the physics of that for a moment, which I think what matters is the combined weight of the bike and the rider is what's relevant for the damage potential. And you could put me on any non-electric bike out there, and I will still be heavier than any one of you on an electric bike. And so unless we want to start weighing riders before they go out on the trails, I don't think we should think about weight as a deciding factor.
Commissioner Cohen.
I'm okay with that. I mean, but I think Jerry trying to express some things that would be useful to get more information on. The staff responded to a couple of requests, whether there was a map or a list or something to be able to try to identify trails that would be impacted by this proposal. And then the commuter trail issue came up also. And maybe it isn't a definitive sort of thing, but even a discussion piece and focusing on the areas that are the most problematic or something, because I mean, I sort of want to get a sense in the real world of what we are going to be endorsing for the council to be considering. And I don't know the best way to do that. You can't just do a GIS thing with it. I mean, for example, we talk about Pioneer Park and changing the rules there. I mean, Pioneer Park, for a lot of it, has access around the perimeter where you don't have to go into the middle of it from a commuting point of view. I'm talking about you might have to go up some steep hills. I understand that. So anyway, so that's one thing that I think would be useful to figure out how to get some real world suggested information of what might be impacted by what. Second thing would be, what would be a manageable way to inform the community that's not yet fully informed about this. We talked about that before, whether it's signage at some key areas with QR codes or whatever it is, Let's Talk page or whatever it is that staff might think is useful. Third thing that occurs to me is, now I lost it. Oh, is the I-90 trail still really something that we ought to be concerned with? Or is that basically there's nothing we're going to be doing or can do legally or otherwise? And if it's the latter, I don't know the answer, but if it's the latter, then let's take that off of the discussion thing. Then a lot of the NIM people, at least a major focus, not the full focus, but a major focus is mooted just from a time and discussion point of view. Sort of like your class 3 idea.
Well, and I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Do you have another comment, Commissioner Westberg?
Well, I agree with Commissioner Cohen about the I-90 trail. Based on the presentation, if we wanted to do something different than Bellevue has done or than exists in state law, it creates all kinds of complications. And why would we do that? It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think we could take that off the table and at least as far as the I-90 trail is concerned, we're all agreed that e-bikes would be allowed, unrestricted. Not motorcycles, of course, we're talking bicycles, but but e-bikes. And then concerning, I said I was going to come back to the question that I raised earlier about the policy up there. The policy makes a clear distinction between class 1 and 2 bikes and what we're going to allow there, and class 3 electric assisted bikes. And the statement in the proposed policy is consistent with King County, with Bellevue, with a distinction that exists in state law. So does anyone, I guess I'd pose the question, does anyone disagree with the statement as written about class 3 bikes? Should class 3 bikes be allowed in our parks and open spaces? And if we can come to some consensus on that question, then we can focus on where either what we're going to do with class 1 and 2 or where we want to allow them.
So I definitely have some thoughts on that. Initially in November, I think we all thought we had come to a good solution based on the speed of class 3 bikes and, maybe allowing bikes on certain paved trails. We're kind of coming up with this compromise, but with class 3 bikes, the fact that they can go 8 miles faster doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be riding them at that speed. And I'm thinking of somebody who may ride at 10 miles per hour. So then why would we not allow that if we would allow riders on a class 1 and 2 going 20 miles an hour? So my
You can't
thought
govern how
process
somebody's
has
going to ride the bike.
exactly. And, a previous comment we received about etiquette versus access really speaks to me that allowing a bike in an area does not dictate how somebody is going to behave. And if we allow a bike that can go 28 miles per hour, that doesn't mean they're going to be riding at that speed. So my thought process has absolutely changed, and I would be more inclined to consider class 1, 2, and 3 all the same, as we have now learned our Washington State Parks and Trails are doing. They're considering 1, 2, and 3 essentially the same. So I don't like what we came up with in November, and would reconsider how we view class 3 for sure.
Chair
I think
Hay?
we need to
Chair
research
Hay-
more what state parks is doing, because I don't think they're opening the door to class 3 on all their trails. I don't think that's the case. And
Yeah.
it's certainly not the case in King County, and it's certainly not the case with our neighboring communities. And the reason it isn't is not just speed, but the size of the bicycle. They're generally larger, heavier, and they generate, there's just more mass behind them.
Yeah.
And so to mix a class 3 size bike in with on a mixed use trail with pedestrians and other users is creating an inherently dangerous situation.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the fact that we do really need more information on this. And even when we were reviewing in November on the matrix of what other cities are doing and what other counties are doing, the regulations are all across, all over the board. And I think that speaks to the fact that we are at the beginning of this new way of learning how to navigate with e-bikes, and they're here to stay. And all cities, all counties are figuring out what works for them. And I think we need to be nimble and start small and go from there and learn from other cities as well. But I'm definitely hearing that we need more information about these bikes, about well, not necessarily about the bikes, but how people are using them in the community. And, as you spoke to class 3, why are some cities banning these in certain areas? I'm hearing there's more information needed, absolutely.
Staff are happy to look into that information and provide it to you at the next meeting. I do want to note on the state parks information, we will also look into that. The information that we were provided tonight states that e-bike use is allowed on state park long distance trails. So there are 5 or 6 trails where the class 1 and class 2 e-bikes would be allowed in parks. I also want to note that Vice Chair Hay has had their hand up for quite some time.
Vice Chair Brissett.
Vice Chair Brissett.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a really nice discussion. I think it's very clear that we're trying to come up with, one rule, so to speak, that deals with really a diversity of the paths and trails and byways and such that we have here. And, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the safety or the impact of the various bikes on the environment. But I think the other thing that we haven't thought about a lot, and we may need some additional information about, is the impact on, the walkers who use these areas. And I'm thinking specifically, the Ravine Trail, where, I was walking there this past weekend and encountered, 3 different families with small children who were using this as an adventure experience. And, I know during the summer, I often encounter, elderly or others who are using assisted devices. So I think, there really is a need to get a broader perspective on, who's using these areas and what, and I don't tell you I have the answer how to go after this, but, but I think we do need to give some thought to the impact that these sorts of vehicles have on the actual walkers. For example, we have some different rules concerning the use of horses. So I don't know if, we need to think through that and, or it may be something as simple as thinking about the width of the trail, where the ravine trails are pretty narrow and and the bikes, can be rather wide, or particularly, if people are riding together, it can be pretty impressive if you come up on a family that's got 2 small toddlers that they're trying to walk through there. So I would agree with all. I think we do need more information and we probably need to give a little more thought to this. I'm not saying I have the answer about how to get there, but I think we need to broaden our perspective and how we're looking at this.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else online that would, okay. And any other comments here? Commissioner Bretman.
I do. So first off, I have really appreciated being part of this process and seeing the democratic process at work and the openness of the other commissioners and the board members to say, hey, we really need to listen more to the community. I really enjoyed, it's been a privilege to be part of this. So thank you, everyone. I have not heard much opposition from the community around the policy on class 3 bikes. And so my thought is that we did kind of go the right direction on the class 3 policy, because that does align with what's happening in Bellevue. It aligns with what's happening in Seattle. I even asked, Ryan about a very, very wide trail I used to use a lot in Seattle for biking. And even that it is not legal to have a class 3 bike on that trail. So I would be in favor of, I think we did go the right direction on class 3 unless I learn additional information otherwise. It was very helpful to hear the commander say that MIPD is not having issues with class 1 and class 2 bikes. And also the desire for simplicity, which I think is really important. So I'm getting increasingly concerned about differentiating between these class 1 and class 2 e-bikes and manual bikes, and that would create a level of complication for understanding what the rules are and for the public to understand, potentially for police. But at the same time, I'm also very worried about any bike being on skinny trails, where we may have users walking on those trails, especially a lot of the older folks in our community walking on those trails. So I do feel concerned about that, though I understand it's outside of our scope to work on manual bicycles, and where manual bicycles are allowed. I would love more information about where they are allowed. And I don't know if you all even have like a little map or anything like that of where manual bikes are allowed. Some kind of visual from the staff would be very helpful. Do we have that on hand?
It's just most trails, honestly.
Most trails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, it'd be helpful to see where they're not. I'm not familiar with those. So then that's one big question I have, is sort of what do we do about manual bikes and those things. Another is I think the idea of including speed limits has come up a lot. A downside of us not having that as part of our policy is that they are included in Seattle, they're included in Bellevue, and we could be communicating. You can go as fast as you want in Mercer Island, right? They come through Mercer, they could just speed through Aubrey Jabus Park. And so I think that's a danger of not having a speed limit sign for our bikes. I think having speed limits, most people want to uphold the law, even if it's within 2 miles an hour of the law, right? Like most people do still want to uphold the law. So I think that makes another case for why we would want to put speed limits in place to set a norm for what our expectation and hope is, even if we don't tell everyone that we can't enforce it. So, and then it does, as the commander said, assist with civil issues by putting a speed limit in place. So I think that's something well worth considering. A few things I've heard tonight that we could at least add to a memo to City Council for future planning, or just include in our future planning, are a recommendation to create a bike connectivity map for Mercer Island. At some point in the process, looking for more community input, whether it's our group or the council, and then if we are going to be deferring to the park director to figure out which trails bikes are allowed and not allowed, I think it's very important to have input from the communities most impacted, which are our cyclists. So some way for our cyclists to be able to be part of those, even just the implementation conversations once we hand this off to the Parks Department. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the bike connectivity map, because something that has come up in these discussions is the fact that we did not address e-bikes in the most recent PROS plan because it wasn't a thing. And I think this is something that needs to become part of the PROS plan in the future, and building out these connection points and safe routes within our community, connecting the trails and the roads and pedestrians and bicyclists. I think this is going to be a big focus in our next PROS plan, and I am really looking forward to diving into that, especially with the eventual startup of the light rail and people wanting to access that. So this is an area where we can really make some big strides in the next few years. Yes, Deputy Mayor Becker.
Yeah, I just have a couple comments here. One is I definitely support Councilmember Reynolds made a suggestion in the matrix regarding being operated in there. And I don't know if somebody said that. I just want to make sure that comment makes it in, that people need to be able to walk these things through whatever we don't allow. Regarding the class 3, I mean, I appreciate your comments about class 3. And I think if the group wants to allow class 3, like that is okay. But I mean, I guess my concern about the class 3 in general is going up to 28 miles per hour. Like I hear community feedback from people where they're like, I saw a bike going 40 miles an hour. And there were these comments about, you know, how much of this problem is the e-motorcycles. And like, that may be most of the problem, but like, I do think that it would be beneficial to tell the public that like, we're only allowing bikes to go up to 20 miles per hour. Like people have this perception that these bikes go so fast. And then if we can say the class 3 is 28 miles per hour, and that if we decided those aren't allowed, and we can say like, we're only allowing these things 20 miles per hour, like I gotta dispel this notion that these bikes are going 40 miles per hour. Because that's what I keep hearing from people. It's like 40 miles per hour. There's no class 1 and class 2 bikes that's going 40 miles per hour.
There's also no class 3 bike that can go 40 miles per hour.
No, I agree. And so then I tell people and I say it's 30 miles per hour and they like think it's 30 miles per hour. No, I agree. And so, and again, if we decide to do, yeah, I agree with you. People have this perception, is what I'm saying. They have a perception that's like, there's no way it's like even a class 3 bike that's going that fast. And so, my last comment is that like, I think there's lots of discussion about like, where the map, and like, I have a hard time saying like what the policy should be without digging into like, which trails are we talking about? Like, I'd be curious, anybody's opinion on like, which trails specifically do you think we shouldn't allow these things in, or which should we definitely allow them in? And I don't know if the two boards can separate and go back through their designated things one by one, but it's almost like we need to start digging into the specifics of like, what is somebody even talking about? Because it's hard. I don't know what to say here without knowing, like, if anybody who's opposed to these in the parks, like which trails specifically are we talking about?
And that is where my eyes were really opened to the need to get into the specificity of the trails and the actual areas and small trails that we don't, might not want bikes and pedestrians on. And some of the comments we received via email were incredibly helpful because some of them did reference certain areas and areas that were gravel paths versus asphalt. So our distinction of asphalt would not work for those trails. So clearly more work to be done and more community input to receive. And I'm hearing that across the board and really happy with this process to be able to get to that point. I'm sorry we didn't get to a motion tonight, but only covering this in 2 meetings would be incredibly fast, and we're not in a hurry here. So are we in agreement, thumbs up, thumbs down, and we kind of want to pause this and get more information, keep the conversation going? Is that the point we're feeling that we're at as a group? I'm seeing head nods. Okay.
I think it would help to identify next steps, what the expectation is, because we can keep talking.
Yeah.
And I agree, we need to. There's still a lot of questions and issues and things like that to resolve, but so how do we keep it moving forward and not just spinning?
I agree. And perhaps Chair Atay and I, and the vice chairs and Ryan, maybe we can sit down and talk next steps about whether we want to meet individually or as a group again. But of course, if anybody has burning questions that they want information about class 3, I'm hearing we want information about that type of bike, maybe the weight of it, why someplace, but more information about that. Any other burning questions that we really need some information on before we go forward?
Can I come back to the class 3 thing just for a second?
Sure.
I've heard some theoretical support for letting class 3 be on the same terms as 1 and 2, but I haven't really heard that that's a big sticking point. This is going back to what Commissioner Westberg said. It seemed like the policy that's written here, not allowed in open spaces or parks, it didn't seem like there was a lot of opposition to that as it relates to class 3. And if that's true, then we don't need staff to be spending a lot of time additionally on class 3.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we want to be sure about it. That's what Rory said
Yeah, good point.
a while ago. Sort of like the Aubrey Davis Trail.
Well, unless you want, since class 3 has been singled out by most other jurisdictions, unless you want, we can get information on why they did that, why they followed the county guideline or the state guideline to separate class 3 from class 1 and 2. But otherwise, I'm not sure what else there is to know. The bigger, heavier bikes, they go faster.
Mm-hmm.
If I could interject real quick, that is a burning question for me, is where does this group sit on class 3? I actually I sort of three questions I would love to ask and get a thumbs up, thumbs down, or no thumb if you sort of abstain, so to speak. But just it would give, I think, staff the opportunity to, would help us form what we're trying to come back to you with at a future meeting. So the first question I have is regarding the I-90 trail. Amelia, did you touch on sort of our limitations there? And I'd like to take that one potentially off of the table as we go forward, but
Yeah, so as we've already mentioned, if we deviate from the policies that WashDOT have in place, we would have to seek approval from them. State law also requires that if a trail extends beyond the boundaries of two jurisdictions, that it maintains consistency. So we would, the way that I take that to read, and obviously we would go to our legal team with this, we wouldn't be able to make the policy more restrictive, but we could make it less restrictive by it. And when I say that, I mean we could allow Class 3 e-bikes on the I-90 trail.
so my question is, should we maintain the I-90 trail as currently operated based on what Seattle and what Bellevue have implemented? So not deviating from that. And I see a question. Oh, is that a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying, or I'd like to say, based on my review of the state law, it's basically out of our jurisdiction. The state law states clearly that the trails that cross jurisdictional boundaries have to maintain consistency. So we don't have to deal with the policy on the I-90 trail.
Easy thumb up. In that case.
Okay, that was teed up as a pretty easy one. Second question is, and we asked this question at the previous meeting, should regular bicycles be treated the same as Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes?
I mean, we haven't been, I mean,
That's a tough one.
I haven't really,
okay.
I haven't even thought about that one very seriously.
Okay, we'll come back with some more information, and I think that information will help to maybe answer that question at the next opportunity. I said I had three, but that
Well,
actually
is anybody actually asking staff to address that issue? Is council or somebody asking?
I'm sorry, what was
the issue about should we treat regular bikes the same way as e-bikes?
So
I mean, I haven't heard, we haven't had any discussion.
That question hasn't been specifically asked, but or been directed to us. But as we evaluate the park rules in the next year, making that distinction today is very helpful, or through this process is helpful to inform future processes as well, and may lead to a recommendation to city council or additional requests for information that we may need. So that's where the root of that question was coming from.
Okay, usually you say that staff is at the end of its available time thing, and so I wondered why you were looking for more to do, but I understand now.
Chair Hay? Chair Tay?
Chair Tay?
I do think that is an important point that Ryan brings up, which brings me back to thinking about the situations that Carolyn was talking about on the Ravine Trail in Pioneer. Those are very narrow trails, so I don't see how, necessarily banning e-bikes on those trails would be different from, regulating regular bikes. You could have the same safety concerns on very narrow trails with switchbacks that are steep with a regular bike or an e-bike. So I don't think it's the motorization that's an issue as much in that situation as it might just be having a really precarious situation with a bicycle at all. So I do think it's worth addressing to some extent.
And then my third question is Councilmember Westberg's question that I'm stealing. How do we feel about class 3? Should we continue to treat them separate of class 1 and 2? Or is additional information needed?
Actually,
That's two questions.
Oh, that was 2 questions. It's always trying to sneak one in.
Commissioner Struck has a question.
thank you. In terms of additional information, I'd be curious to know what share of the e-bike population is class 3? So if the data comes back, and again, we're not going to know specifically for Mercer Island, but if from industry statistics, if class 3 represents 5% of total sales, it's not a big impact. If it's 50%, then we probably have to have a little bit more discussion about it. Thank you.
Those were all of my questions, Chair Hay. Thank you.
Well, and if we're going to dig into class 3, I guess, is follow up with neighboring jurisdictions and find out what their rationale is for treating class 3 differently.
Looks like Councilmember Reynolds has a question.
Yeah, I actually had the same question as Commissioner Strzok, and I actually did a little Google search out here. And it looks like class 3s are about 10 to 15% of total sales. Of course, that may vary by region, but.
And that was when Rad Power Bike was selling a lot of bikes.
Yeah.
I'll bet
I don't know what the population of extant bikes is as opposed to current sales, but it's kind of in that never land of significant enough to think about, but not so clearly significant that you have to think about it a lot. I don't know.
I'll bet if you treated them the same as 1 and 2, you would see that percentage increase.
Possibly. I'll be honest, when I bought my bike, I have a class 2. At the time I bought it, I didn't even know the difference between a 2 and a 3. Didn't know what I was buying. I suspect that's true of a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I'm going to want to do some personal research on this to understand more about it. Yeah. And I mean, to use Craig's example, and not singling you out here, but you brought it up, we know it. Craig on a class 1 versus, a child on a class 3. How do you weight that impact? Not literally, but you know what I'm saying. So, it's one of those things I think we need to dive into. And so TBD on that. Sorry, we can't give you an answer. So
It's fine to use me as an example on that. I brought it up, so I deserve it.
it's fair game, right?
One more comment.
Commissioner Cohen.
This is just something I thought of on Hillary's point about the ravines and everything like that. I mean, when I walk in the ravines, occasionally I've seen a regular bike, and their people are usually very courteous, the bike riders, and they get off of them and roll them either down or up down the stair area. I'm not an e-bike rider. I've only tried one once and didn't want to go that way. But as I understand it, that would be a lot more difficult with a heavier e-bike to just get off it and push it up from down by, down. And so I think there may be a distinction between them.
Okay. So more conversation to be had. Do we have an idea if we want to do this separately as a board and as a commission and then come back together at some point? If so, we could put this on our Parks and Rec agenda for Tuesday, or maybe we meet separately and work out those details. What do you think, Ryan?
Based on the information desired, there's no chance that we're going to have that information by Tuesday in a meaningful format. So I would probably say not Tuesday or of next week, which is the Parks and Recreation Commission special meeting. I would say let's get together the leadership team and talk about next steps and what makes sense for the 2 boards. I would foresee, based on the calendar and planning schedule for the Parks and Recreation Commission, keeping the bike skills well, I'm living in the past here. The e-bike conversation separate of our regular meetings, so establishing special meetings. I think that's beneficial for community members who come in and want to engage in a specific topic. So that would be my recommendation, but we can work through that maybe next week and discuss a schedule that would work for the boards.
Great. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for their incredibly thoughtful comments, including the public and all of the comments we received over the past couple of weeks. So there being no other business to come before the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Open Space Conservancy Trust, the time is now 6:57 and the meeting is adjourned. As a reminder to commissioners and trustees, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the broadcast. Good evening and thank you for joining us.